Hi. So at Jesus' visit to Bethany in Mark 11, I noticed how consistent the characters of the sisters were. So Mary, remember Mary, and we've met them before in the Bible, Mary and Martha. Remember, she was the one that sat at Jesus' feet while he was teaching and holding on to his every word, while Martha fussed over the preparations for dinner, making sure she was delivering top-notch hospitality. Well, here we saw her again doing just that, serving, and Mary was anointing him with expensive perfume. Now, this buttresses the fact that I made before that these ladies were obviously loaded because the perfume was made out of pure nard. Nard was gotten from from the root of a flowering plant that is found in the Himalayas region of Tibet and in northern India. And the cost was about 1 year minimum wage at that time. So this was imported expensive perfume, not to be afforded by just anybody, right? And there's definitely symbolism in her actions of washing and anointing Jesus's feet. From what I understand, that was a slave's job. Back in those days, they didn't have cars, and also people walked around a lot, not a little. And so once someone comes into a house, it's the slave's job to wash the feet of the visitor. And not only did she wash his feet, and anoint his feet with the oil, she wiped it with her hair. And we all know that even back then, a woman's crowning glory was her hair. So this was an act of total submission and total humility. Now, Judas and his objection, to me, I was like, yes, guide. So we know that it wasn't obviously altruistic. It was fueled by his personal greed, because from what we understood, he was the accountant and he was helping himself to the purse whenever he wanted. So it came from a place of criticism and false goodness, because he was saying, oh, it should have been. And I'm sure this was fueled by a need to satisfy his greed and his sticky fingers, because he would think, oh, if she sold it, there's more money for me to steal. And John mentioned the Greek. So as we go on, John mentioned the Greek or the Gentile folks who wanted an introduction to Jesus in verses 20 to 21. And even though we can't tell if Jesus actually granted them the audience or not, instead he told the facts surrounding his death and the reason for it in verse 24, where he says a grain of wheat must fall to the ground and die in order to produce a harvest. Now, his death was definitely, the death of him, one person, was definitely going to produce a harvest of souls. What was obvious from the scriptures is that his death was the only way that men would be reconciled to God, and he had to go through all the pain and the suffering to pay our sin debt, because he was the only perfect sacrifice. Now here's my hashtag lesson to know God lesson. Jesus was totally submitted to God the Father. He demonstrated humble and total submission to the authority of the Father, and in spite of him being God the Son, because the Father had endorsed him and affirmed him over and over, but he didn't even try once to get out of the Father's will. Even though he knew what it meant for him, he knew it meant death and suffering. This was such a huge lesson for us. In John 12:44, Jesus loudly declared, "The one who believes and trusts in me does not believe only in me, but also in he that sent me." So I believe the takeaway for us here is this: believe in Jesus and believe in God. Be submitted to his will and act in total and humble surrender. Thanks for joining me today. As usual, it's always a pleasure to share my lessons with you, and I look forward to doing the same tomorrow, God willing. See you here. Have a good day. Bye.